Hey YouTube, it's another video. This one's more about generational theory, and why I just get frustrated with how it seems like every 2 years we're redefining what a millennial is. It seems like the only thing we keep in stone is what a boomer is. But um, but yeah, it's been on my mind a lot lately about generational theory and everything. Um, as someone born in the early '90s, I always, I'm a pretty much a full-fledged millennial, maybe slightly on the younger end, but it irritates me when I meet, different like people are redefining what each generation is. To me, a generation is 18 years. So, and everybody knows the baby boom started at 1945, and so that would end at about 1963. Um, and that's generally speaking what we've always defined the baby boom as. I mean, it's pretty obvious. One, we always start it with post-World War II. You look at, the baby boom, aka an influx of births, primarily kind of celebrating the end of the war, and also combined with, the 1950s was a pretty pronounced decade for, at least for white America, at least. But also to some degree, you were seeing some level of even black wealth happen in that time period, just not as pronounced. And also there was to some degree white fragility about black wealth, which is sad because I don't like that shit. But so they would they when they don't I don't like when they try to like, we all know about like Black Wall Street in Oklahoma and everything like that. But um but I get frustrated when people, it seems like to me that the millennial generation is shrinking in terms of how the years we're defining it. And I don't know if there, I don't think there's like a grand conspiracy to do it, but it seems like to me that I truly believe they might be shrinking the definition of a millennial because there's a lot of them, because our parents were boomers, so we're called echo boomers. But I also think they're shrinking it because the Zoomer generation is a lot smaller. So they're trying to at least increase the years that define a Zoomer to at least then say we have as many Zoomers as we have millennials, which we obviously don't. It does seem like there is a concern. I always talk about, on a side note, before I start talking a little more about what I define each generation as, I have noticed, again, as someone born in the early 90s, obviously I was only about 10 years old when the 2000s started, but, I look back on the 2000s and it's like from 2000 to 2010 feels like two radically different time periods. And I know some people might say, well, that's because you came of age. You went from 9 to 19 or so. And it's like, well, maybe it is, but I mean, in the year 2000, dial-up internet, isn't that like in the year 2000, isn't that like a Conan O'Brien thing? But in 2000, like dial-up internet was still the standard, I believe, in the majority of homes. I believe it wasn't until 2003 where DSL finally overtook broadband, or finally overtook 56K. Now, granted, younger people like myself, who had, families who had younger people like myself or my other, my brothers and sisters and stuff, our parents are going to probably get a better internet connection quicker than, say, a 68-year-old, of someone who is like 60 years old in 2000, 2001, who doesn't care as much. But I do think it's fascinating how people will say that, you know, 2000 to 2010, I just think is like, you can't just sit here and say it's because that was like 9 to 19 for me. I mean, to me, it's just such a radically different time period. Dial-up internet was still the standard. Smart cell phones were barely a thing. I mean, I know that the smartphone was around in according to the 90s, the IBM Simon was the first smartphone, but we all know smartphone culture and the more colloquial definition of, I think I used that word right, of smartphone kind of began in the late aughts, is how we kind of define it. But, but, to me, it's crazy how, in all the ways that you want the world to speed up, the world seems like it's screeching to a halt. And in all the ways you want maybe the world to slow down to enjoy the moment, it seems like it's going by way too fast. But anyway, to go back to the topic of the generations, um, the baby boom clearly started in 1945 with the end of World War II, and it's aptly named baby boom because we had an increase of births in the country. Now, keep in mind, not every country had a baby boom. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of European countries never had one because their countries were decimated after the war. That they had to rebuild. They had to physical infrastructure, governments, you name it. Everything had to be rebuilt, and so you could argue they never had a baby boom for that reason. I mean, there might be other reasons too, but that was generally how most historians view it. But America was a country that was obviously we had casualties in World War II, but none of our outside of Pearl Harbor we were untouched because we were surrounded by two massive bodies of water. Um, and so we had our baby boom, and that's generally defined as 1945 to I believe 1963, which is about 18 years. And generally speaking, I thought most people viewed a generation as 18 years, aka being born to graduating high school. Um, and then you're out off into the real world. And then historically, your parents tended to be one generation. There's like a one generation in between you and your parents. So I'm a millennial. My parents were boomers. Obviously, that's not always the case. Some boomers didn't have kids till even later. So there's parents who were born in the 50s and they didn't have their first child till 99 or 2000, which means you're a boomer that had a zoomer, which is kind of weird. But most of the time, it's the boomers had millennial children, Gen X had zoomer children. The boomers' parents were the greatest generation, which maybe they shouldn't be called that, but we call them that. And Gen X's parents were the silent generation. And each they alternate. It looks like at least as of recent times, the boomer millennial generation should be tended to be larger. The Gen X Zoomer generation is smaller. Um, but most people, I always thought, defined a generation as 18 years. Now, um, so 1945 to 1963 kind of coincides with the baby boom, and that's 18 years. Gen X is, I think most people define as like 63, 64, and goes to about 1981, which is, I read a lot of millennials. We tend to define the millennials as 1981 as the start. I've read, I know Canada, I believe, has defined millennials as young or as far back as 1979. But in America, I've always read the millennials are 1980, 81, maybe 82. So we'll say 81. Well, 81 plus 18 years happens to be the turn of the millennium about 1999. So, a millennial is 81 to 99. But now I'm starting to see many people define the millennials as like 81 to like 95. So 14 years. So that shrinks. And so then people are defining Zoomers as like 95 or 96 to 2014. And it's like, what are these major events that are truncating these things? I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious. The only generational question I always asked is, there doesn't seem to be a really stopping point between Gen X and Millennial. 1981, I don't know of any major event that really happened then. But World War II ending in 45 is obviously a starting point. 1962-63 was the start of a lot of civil rights movements, which was kind of like the beginning of the boomers, kind of starting to be more vocal, be college students protesting. That's, the college protester has been something that's been around from the dawn of college being, mass adopted by America. So I kind of viewed that as like the civil rights movement combined with the Cold War really, peaking in the 60s kind of, as like the beginning of Gen X. So and then of course 81. I don't know really of too many events that would end Gen X and start millennial. But other than that, it's like what defines the end of a millennial? Well, I mean, to some, it's either A, the year 2000, which was the end of the 1900s and the end of whatever the 20th century, um, or B, 9/11, which happened about a year and a half later. Those are either one of those are pretty good stopping points for the millennials. And so I would define the millennial generation as like 81 to like 99. But that means you're going to have to define the Zoomer generation as 2000 to 2018. Well, I don't read anybody defining a Zoomer as 2000 to 2018. I'm reading it as like 96 to 2013, 2014. And it's like, what happened in 2014 to end the Zoomers? I mean, to me, 2000 or 99 or 2000 to start the Zoomers makes perfect sense. And cutting it off at either 2016 or 2020, so you'd extend the Zoomer generation by a few years, possibly, or shrink it by 2 years or so. But to me, like, those two events, the 2016 election was insane. And obviously the aftermath, I mean, it's generally considered to be I actually, here's a hot topic. I actually preferred Hillary, but at this point, I'm one of those people who, I have political opinions, but I'm generally speaking, when I'm having fun or trying to do something, I generally am able to not turn everything into, I don't want to have fun because, and I think leftists have a problem where, I don't want to have fun because I feel guilty because of racism or something. It's like, that's such a narcissistic worldview, but I know a lot of left-leaning people who, like, they don't know how to have fun because, they feel like that's evil because George Floyd got, murdered. And it's like, well, what happened to George Floyd was fucked up, but you're one person and you're actually showing a level of narcissism by thinking that you shouldn't have fun because of racism. It's like, no, the best way to combat it is to go out, have fun, and include people of different walks of life with your group and have fun and socialize and have a good time. That's the number one thing you can do to avoid George Floyd's from happening, if you ask me, as an individual. Not scream loud at in somebody else's face who, is bitter or whatever. But that's another topic for another time. The end of the Zoomers, to me, has to be 2016 or 2020. So you're going to define the Zoomer generation as starting around 99, 2000 and close it off at 2016. That's doable. But it's either one of those two. And then, of course, 2020 was, March-ish was when COVID started. So to me, it's like, I don't understand why Gen Alpha is 2014 now. I mean, Gen Alpha is apparently 10 years old. I've never heard of this. It's like, to me, Gen Alpha is about 4. The oldest Gen Alphas are probably like 4 to 6. So I don't know. When did Gen Alpha turn to 2014 to the present? Why are the millennials now just 81 to 95? That's 14 years. Yeah, so, and then, of course, some people are now saying the boomers are 45 to 65, which means that the boomers are 20 years. To me, the end point of the boomers has to either be like something like the Kennedy assassination, the MLK assassination, maybe a year or so later, the civil rights movement really kicking off around 62 or so, if I recall. I'd have to check my 1960s history knowledge isn't very strong. I'm more of a Civil War era type stuff, but yeah, why are the generations now, like, why is Gen Alpha 2014? That doesn't make any sense to me. Again, to wrap it up, boomers 45 to 62, Gen X 62, 63 to 81, millennials 81, 80, 82 to 90, 89, 2000. Zoomers 99, 2000, maybe even 01 to 2018, 2019. 2016 if you want to do like a 99 to 2016 type of thing. And if you define the Zoomers as, 99 to 2016, which is 17 years, that's reasonable. And then you could say Gen Alpha is about 8, which, the oldest Gen Alphas would be 8 or so, which is, okay. You can, start to talk to them, like, observe their trends or whatever. That's a second grader, though. You got to keep in mind, a lot of people change from second grade to 7th grade, But yeah, I just don't understand this notion that Gen Alpha is now 2014. I mean, according to that, we're getting close to being done with Gen Alpha. To me, the Zoomers just ended 4 years ago. Anyway, just my thoughts and I'm out.